here we are on a high-profile case, and it looks like he will basically walk away because the prosecution isn't seeking the maximum penalty. He's already spent, maybe a year in jail.
And he's still in jail.
And he's still in jail.
So Diddy is facing up to maximum, I suppose, of 20 years. And I laughed and said, no, he's never going to get that. And he probably won't. All right. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law, Summertime Edition. Stephen Thiele, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, Gavin. It's, it was raining here. It's actually stopped now. So that was pretty interesting. Early morning shower.
I am once again in lovely cottage country north of Toronto. And it is spectacular for, as I said in previous episodes, most beautiful place in the world for a few months of the year and maybe more, depending on your point of view. But certainly this weekend has been a glorious festival of Mother Nature's bounty.
100%. And I gotta tell you, my bounty is still sitting at home in my refrigerator. I picked a bunch of cherries last week from a cherry tree in my backyard, and wow. It's like 2 branches gave me hundreds of cherries. It was just unbelievable.
Wow. That sounds, life is a bowl of cherries. Well, not for one guy down in the United States. Well, I guess his cherries are turning up a little bit better now. And this episode is a little different. I mean, we usually talk about cases in, Canada and Ontario, and we talk about specific issues in law that have come up in certain cases. This was a little different. It comes out of a request from a listener. It's like, well, are you guys going to talk about the Diddy case? It's like, initially it was like, no, that's really good. Then I thought, why not? We, in Canada, I think in generally speaking, people reference the law very much from what I'll call celebrity U.S. trials. And the reason why I say that is I can't tell you how many times I've made reference to the OJ case when people talk about, well, he wasn't convicted. So, and I say, well, so what? He was still sued civilly, successfully. And I mean, how is that possible? And you can raise that. People automatically go, oh yeah, that's right. And they understand because they recall, of course, that case of who couldn't. And it puts it in a little bit of context. So we think about, I think, the law to a large degree here in Canada, and I suppose around the world, framed in the lens of these celebrity, huge mega trials out of the United States. And I think the Diddy case may be that kind of a case.
For sure. Look, we're influenced by U.S. media. You mentioned O.J. Simpson. I can remember being glued to the TV and watching the police chase on the highway for that. And we're definitely, as I said, we're influenced by the American media, and people, even here, I know when we speak to clients in their civil cases, they talk about depositions rather than discoveries. And, is it like that? Is, what happens on TV? And we have to basically say to them, no, we're a different jurisdiction. That doesn't happen here. The process is a lot different. But look, it's there's a lot of celebrity fame, and people build themselves on that fame. The current president of the United States has built himself on a reputation that he developed on TV.
Yeah, I mean, well, he was, look, I mean, the current president of the United States might go down in history as the definition of narcissism, going way, way back. But we live in a very narcissistic society, probably more so than ever before. And I don't know that human nature's changed very much. But the ability to be famous is beyond, I think, any point in history. And we see people like Coombs who have risen in both power, in fame, wealth, social influence, and become really icons of society. And when we talk about who is Sean Coombs, I mean, we're older, we may not realize it, but this is a guy who has really been at the forefront of media, business, the hip hop culture. Here's a guy that's, he is a mega force in popular culture.
He's a mega star. Look, he was transformational in terms of hip hop music and bringing that to a mainstream pop audience. So, uh, uh, you know, fashion, other media interests. I had a reality show called Making the Band. He's a shooting star, right? Like, he really rose to the top, and people follow him. Uh, uh, he's worth $1 billion, well, certainly at one time was worth $1 billion. And it's like these folks can do no wrong, except that he got his hand, I guess, caught in the cookie jar with respect to
Yeah, or other body parts. It's a kind of a disgusting story, that's for sure. And really, what I think. So the prosecution, of course, his world it started to disintegrate. I think with the airing of what was a really horrible videotape. His world had probably disintegrated beforehand, but nothing that he couldn't, with his wealth and power and fame, control to a significant degree. I mean, the guy really comes across as the true definition of the Svengali type character who is all controlling of those around him, and really exerted enormous power. And I guess the question becomes for the prosecution of this case is, does that cross the line into criminality? Is it just merely, the dominant force of a personality, both using its wealth and power, or however it may have that, in a way that is, not for good, that's for sure. But does it cross the line into criminality? So we'll all recall that, rather horrible videotape of him in the hotel, kind of dragging his girlfriend around a hallway, beating her. It was just awful.
Yeah, he pulled her down from behind and kicked her a couple of times, tried to drag her down the hallway, threw a vase at her or threw something at her. It was just, that video was online. It's a 2016 video.
Yeah.
Just bizarre incident. I'm surprised the charges weren't pressed immediately by Miss Ventura at that time, but.
Well, they kind of were. I mean, so just getting the background of all of this, so people probably already know, but just a quick background was, I think the real unraveling that led to the criminal prosecution was she actually sued about that.
Yes.
It was a civil claim by Ventura, which was settled the day it was issued, from what I understand. And I am sure that there was, in exchange for what undoubtedly were significant amounts of money paid to Miss Ventura, the usual confidentiality clauses, etc., were probably exacted from her. They didn't do much from Mr. Diddy's perspective, because the criminal charges followed shortly after the settlement of the civil case.
Yeah, she got $20 million, and
that's all.
Yeah, if somebody wants to give me $20 million, I'll be happy to take it. But
well, I don't know if you'd want to get dragged around and beaten up to get it.
I definitely don't want to get dragged around and beaten up for that. But
she had to do worse stuff than that. But.
Look, and any claim, as Gavin, once it's filed, is a matter of public record. So the confidentiality doesn't cover what goes into the public docket. And I'm sure there were a lot of allegations that were made in that statement of claim. Again, I guess Mr. Combs tried to cover things up or sweep them under the rug, so to speak, and use his fame and power and wealth to do that. But a grand jury or prosecutors decided to take the allegations to a grand jury. And so he was charged for racketeering and sex trafficking crimes in 2024. So,
yeah, another way that the American system is quite different than the Canadian system is this notion of the grand jury and indictments, and we've talked in other episodes about
Right.
the ability to get an indictment. But I actually pulled down the charge that was delivered to the grand jury, and I really thought that the first paragraph of that grand jury indictment, charged to the grand jury by the prosecution, really sums up what they were after. So they if I can read it, it says, for decades, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love. enough pseudonyms there for a fraud ring. Anyways, the defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Coombs relied on the employees, resources, and influences of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Now, that's just the first paragraph, and it goes on and on and on. But in that, we really see the seeds of what this charge was about. And I think one of the issues that's really confusing, to me at least, and I didn't really understand it. I was like, what the heck was he even charged with? Like these sex parties or whatever that he was hosting and what have you. So how did it get into a criminal charge? And really what that gets into this notion of a RICO racketeering charge. And that is a very, very different level of criminal conduct than just the, I did something. It really requires a web, if you will, of crime and a number of individuals that are involved in it. And I thought, like, well, how did we get there with Diddy and his beating up of his girlfriend on the videotape, which I thought was a crime, obviously, and he should have been, as you point out, charged with that. Pretty obvious, but he wasn't. They went for more, and I think that really, to me, was the very, very interesting aspect of all of this.
Yeah. So historically, my understanding, Gavin, is that the racketeering charge was developed to break down organized crime in the United States, and and was used very successfully to get to get at mafia crime bosses with respect to their activities. And so that's how the racketeering charge, my understanding, developed. And since they've been successful in that, there haven't been as many charges against organized crime bosses, and so they've expanded the racketeering to look at business enterprises, which Sean obviously developed. We talked about that: fashion, alcohol, and other media, and tried to link those two together. This is again my understanding and differences between Canada and the United States. This was a federal prosecution. This wasn't a state prosecution.
Right.
And so, in order to make it a state crime or a federal crime, they needed to link it to the racketeering. And so, they were trying to use the, King's wild King's nights, freakouts, his sex parties, and to link all that sex trafficking together with his business interests to make it a racketeering charge, which, my understanding from reading reports on this, put the prosecution actually in a very difficult position because it was a very difficult crime to prove. And,
Well,
he
yeah,
was found
yes
not
and
guilty of
no.
that, right?
Yeah, yes and no, I think, because there's a lot of flexibility in the prosecution under RICO, and one of the things that they can bring up in a RICO prosecution, and they use it a lot. I mean, now it's become almost commonplace for the prosecution in the U.S. to use RICO, because once they do, they can bring in all sorts of past conduct and witnesses and all sorts of material that probably would not be admissible in a straight up prosecution on a crime for a singular act, because it's prejudicial. I mean, the fact that, what you did 10 years ago with someone unrelated to what you did are being charged with, is not admissible. It has no relevance theoretically. But if you're talking about a long history and relationships, except all of a sudden it does have potentially some relevance. So it really widens the net in terms of the dirt, frankly, that the prosecution can drag up and put in front of a jury in terms of the prosecution. And I think that's one of the reasons why they like it so much. I mean, it's been used. RICO statutes have now been used to target all sorts of criminals. Like R. Kelly was charged under that. He was charged and convicted of exploiting children under RICO. Keith Rainier for sex trafficking. Another one, Bill Huang, was a founder of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. He was in prison for manipulating financial markets, all under RICO statutes. So the court needed to prove the prosecution needed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Coombs knowingly worked with others to commit at least two underlying crimes, the predicate acts, for the purpose of this larger racketeering issue. It really opens up the door for an enormously broad evidentiary background. And here, I think, I don't know how many, 34 witnesses.
34 witnesses were put forward by the prosecution against none. For the defense, they didn't lead any evidence. So
that's not unusual. I mean, I think for listeners that aren't, I mean, it comes back to he didn't. Why didn't he testify? Well, he of course is not required in any way to testify, and it comes back to the onus of proof that exists in all criminal prosecutions, which is that the onus of proof lies at the feet of the prosecutor. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt all the elements of the offense in question. And, the accused is entitled to sit back and say, prove it. And if you don't, as the prosecutor, you lose.
And they largely lost, right? I mean, they didn't get the racketeering charge was dismissed, and the sex trafficking charge was dismissed. Now, he was found guilty still of a serious offense under U.S. law with respect to engaging in the transportation of prostitution, or whatever that charge is quite called. I guess he was transporting sex workers across state lines.
Yeah, pretty weak in terms of. I mean, look,
but still a 10-year maximum conviction for each of the counts.
He's not
and
getting
so he
10
faces.
Years.
No, of course. Well, the prosecution isn't even recommending 10 or 20 years.
I mean, how long?
Would be the maximum.
One of the things, the other aspect of this, and I haven't really seen a lot of this. I mean, let's. So just to put this in its disgusting context of what this was about, I don't even really talk about naive. I don't really even understand the whole purpose of this. He would have these like sex parties where I guess he would have his girlfriends or whatever doing live sex shows for the entertainment and benefit of, I'm not exactly sure who, but anyways,
for him, he'd be sitting there, or maybe he was a participant. I'm not sure, but
I don't know.
I wasn't in the room.
I don't want to know. The Diddy, the whole Diddy cases, I don't want to know. Like, I mean, I really, at this point in my life, I just don't want to know. Anyways, okay, whatever. So the transportation is, so he would hire male prostitutes to be the co-performers with his girlfriends, who he would, and I guess he would transport them. I mean, it struck me that the element of the charge in terms of a technical, technical proving the elements of the case were pretty easy, because there were receipts. There were payments on credit cards. There were airline tickets. There's a paper trail linking the sex acts to the transportation of the people performing the sex acts. And insofar as he paid the male performers, then that was it. Okay. But I mean, That's it. That was the charge. There was no violent crime for which he was convicted. Nothing.
No,
That's not
which
a
is,
violent
well,
crime.
again, maybe it's the difference between a state prosecution versus a federal prosecution, right? Would a state prosecution, uh, you know, uh, be an assault kind of charge, right? Would be the violence with respect to that. I mean, they tried to do that, I guess, with respect to the sex trafficking, that there was coercion involved in that. But again, the jury dismissed that part of the charge. You know,
Yeah.
and look, again, I wasn't
Well, the
there.
coercion part was threatening, and there were also other
Right.
aspects of this too. I mean, they were all violent. There was a fair bit of. I mean, the guy is a violent guy. Everybody's seen the video. He's a violent guy.
Apparently, yeah.
Well, clearly, if that's one video, I mean, that's if you're violent on that occasion, you're violent.
Well, could be isolated violence, but I think with respect to Mr. Combs, there was evidence that he does have a violent nature, and I think actually the defense kind of admitted that look, he's not a saint.
Yeah. Super smart.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I mean, coming back to the issues that come out of this. I mean, people, the defense conceded at the trial that, look, he's a violent guy. He's violent in his personal relationships. He was violent to his girlfriend Ventura. He was violent to the other woman involved. I think her name was Jane.
Well, they call her Jane.
That. They didn't run away from their bad facts, and they embraced them, but they said that does not lead to the elements of the offense of which he was charged, and they were successful with respect to that.
Well, and they probably look. I wasn't following the trial, Gavin. It's but I guess in cross examination, they brought up text messages from both Miss Ventura and the other unidentified woman that they called Jane, that they were enthusiastic participants in these freakouts and hotel nights. Who knows? It almost strikes me as elements with those 5 hockey players from the junior team in terms of text messages that said, "Hey, yeah, come on over, and I'm happy to do that." But
yeah, and like it reminded me of the Gameshi case here in Canada, where the text messages really sunk the Crown's case. What happened there was, as I recall, was that the victims in the case were testifying, and then text messages were put to them afterwards, like after the night of the alleged assaults. I don't think they weren't necessarily alleged. I think that the conduct was conceded.
It happened, right?
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it was just straight up assault. But in any event, he was charged with sexual assault, and one of the issues was consent. And then they had text messages from the victims the day out, "Hey, I want to go on another date." So that type of thing is going to play pretty heavy in a jury, saying, "Well, you sure don't sound like somebody who is, a victim at this point in time. You sound like you are a volunteer and a willing participant in these events." And let me put it to you this way. This comes back to, I think, what we're talking about in terms of when we get beneath the law. We're talking about onus. Even if you say, "Well, yeah, okay, well, she was just saying that because she was afraid," or that, but in the back of your mind is saying, "Well, could she have been potentially a willing participant?" Well, probably not, but maybe. And as soon as you say probably not, but maybe,
that's it.
The glove don't fit, and you must acquit.
You must, right. And look, I mean, beneath the law too, my understanding is it was an 8-man jury and 4 women.
That's remarkable. Yeah.
So when you look at the balance of the jury, and you're asking all these questions, why go back? You're in a 10-year relationship with this guy, and you're complaining about it. Like, what's really going on here? And look, I don't know Miss Ventura at all, and power imbalances certainly can influence the attitudes of people, and how they react or act. The whole thing just it's an unfortunate situation for women, quite frankly. And here
Yeah.
we are again, a man, did a man get away with satisfying his sexual urges and that kind of thing? And here we are on a high profile case. And as you say, it looks like he will basically walk away because the prosecution isn't seeking the maximum penalty. He's already spent, maybe a year in jail. So
Yeah, that's interesting to me.
right?
Yeah. I mean, he's still in jail.
And he's still in jail.
So the sentencing is not until the fall. And this is, I think, some of the comments that I've seen from the trial judge, and this is important, I think, as well, because it's the trial judge, of course, that metes out the sentencing. So Diddy is facing up to maximum, I suppose, of 20 years. And I laughed and said, no, he's never going to get that. And he probably won't. But he's two factors are interesting here. The trial judge has made some pretty, I thought, damning comments. I think one of them I read is that he had a, quote, disregard for the rule of law and a propensity for violence. That's a pretty loaded comment from a trial judge who's about to mete sentence out on what is fundamentally, I mean, people may argue about it, but it's not a crime of violence in the sense of what he was convicted of, which is crossing, transporting people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. It could be violent, but I don't think there was any allegation here that the male prostitutes that were transported, were somehow, done so like hostages or something of that nature. I think they were willing business people who were being paid to perform a service and were traveling to their job site. I mean, that seems to be so it was not, to my mind, in this situation, a crime of violence. And, that's a pretty heavy comment from the trial judge. We'll see what sentence he has. But the other part of it that I think is interesting is he's been locked up in pretrial custody. And what I understand am I right that he was locked up in Rikers Island?
I don't know why.
which I understand it is literally a hellhole. And he's been there for a year and he's still there.
Maybe he likes it. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on what goes on in a prison.
There's been cases talking about the fact that time at Rikers is like, gets particular value in terms of pretrial custody because it's so awful that it's taken into account in terms of sentencing. So bearing that in mind, like for the purposes of this pretrial custody aspect of it, and for the beneath the law part, you are presumed innocent until you're convicted.
Right.
So if you're locked up before you're convicted, that's time spent theoretically while you were innocent, right? You are, and when it comes time for your sentencing on the charge of which you were found guilty, the court will take into account and give greater credit for time served in pretrial custody.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So that's interesting because from what I've read from criminal lawyers in the U.S., they believe that the sentence should be somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. So if he has spent a year in the worst prison in New York that they can find, he basically may face no jail time whatsoever.
Right, because
based on the time served.
He's been in jail. So the point is that and for a listener's perspective, if he walks out of the courtroom, remember he has been in jail, and that time served is a significant credit to the accused in any criminal, or not accused, but to the convicted in any criminal prosecution. And I think here, given the nature of the other thing is the nature of the trial, they struck out on the major counts that they were after, and they convicted him on the lesser, what I'll call the smaller crime, which I don't think he denied.
The lower hanging fruit crime.
Well, he pled not guilty to it, but
I don't know
that they didn't put much opposition up to the elements of the offense. I mean, I don't think, as I say, I don't think there was any way to really dispute the fact that he hired, he hired male prostitutes and he transported them to do their thing. And that would, to my mind, be all the elements of that offense.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
100%. 100%. Sentencing and whether he spends time in jail is
Well, he
one.
has spent time in jail.
Yeah, no. I mean that's one thing in terms of what lies now beyond the guilty plea. He still faces, my understanding, dozens of civil
70.
lawsuits. How
Seven
many?
zero. Listen, once the word gets out, you're handing out checks for $20 million. It's amazing how far the
I
planet
think
goes.
I'll bring a lawsuit.
No kidding. I mean, I might have a lawsuit now for like being mentally scarred at the mental picture of just even reading about this horrible case. But yeah, 70 civil lawsuits. And again, going back to my OJ analogy, look, just because he was acquitted on, he wasn't acquitted on the individual acts for which theoretically he's being sued in these 70 lawsuits. He was acquitted on the racketeering charge,
Right.
which tried to knit them all together into a criminal enterprise, a organized crime aspect of that. So, more to come for Mr. Diddy, more financial woes undoubtedly in front of him, and maybe deservedly so. And maybe, is it the end of him? What do you think? Is it over, or does it just add to his cred?
You know what? It's sometimes it doesn't matter, even if it's bad press. It makes you more famous and makes you, more of a star, and will continue to build his wealth.
Yeah.
It's look, you look at certain things, particularly in the United States. It seems to happen. It doesn't matter what you do once you've reached a high level and an apex, so to speak. You can almost do no wrong, and it doesn't matter. There will be people just who will have different opinions. Oh, they just went after him, etc., etc. The guy still has his talent, right, in terms of being a rapper. So,
well, in terms of being King Midas, he seems to turn everything into gold that he comes around, including this. And I mean, I think we live in a time, as I said, where fame is its own currency, and it just seems to me, I think that there's an element of notoriety with him right now in his world. I bet you I bet a guy, if anybody can figure out how to monetize that, it
will be him.
Yeah. He was the pioneer of all of this, and here we go. Next chapter in his legacy. Anyways, a remarkable case. It'd be interesting to see what I think we'll do a postscript about the sentence after the fact and see what that leads. And again, the trial judge did not seem impressed, and then any appeal of that sentence that may come forward. Or I doubt that there will be an appeal by the prosecutors, but I think you'll see, if there's a heavy sentence here, I think you'll see an appeal of that. And where that goes, I think the trial judge's comments, depending on when they were made, might come back to haunt that trial judge in an appeal.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see what comes out of it. It's interesting case anyway. Certainly for us to bandy about, talk about, and get underneath of what has happened here.
Yeah, as always, we try to get beneath the law, and who knows? We may not know much about what's on top of it, but we know a lot of what's underneath it. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening again, and we really appreciate it. We love the feedback. We love the requests for topics, including this one, which was a request and a little off the beaten path for what we usually talk about. And certainly give us your comments, kudos, criticisms. We love it all, because everything, we're in this to learn something and to talk about things and dig a little deeper and scratch the surface a little bit more than the mainstream media does in these types of cases, which are, of course, very, very mainstream. And once again, Stephen, always remember, If no one is above the law, everyone is beneath it.